15th of April, 1945. Southwest of Bergen, British tanks crush the chain-link gates of Bergen-Belsen. The engines roar, but the silence inside is heavier. Steel treads bite into the mud. A thick, sweet stench of decay hits the crews. It chokes the air, drowning out the diesel fumes. 13,000 corpses rot in the open air. They lie scattered like discarded dolls. 60,000 living skeletons crawl between them. 13,000 dead. That is the entire population of a district center, erased in one place. 3 years later, the world will call her the hyena. But in April 1945, the British see only a young woman. She stands among the hills of the dead. Irma Grese, 22 years old. Her face is calm. Her uniform is neat. The contrast is a physical blow. She is the face of the collapse, yet she looks like a shopgirl from a peaceful street. This was not a sudden descent. Bergen-Belsen was merely the final act of a career built on blood. For 3 years, she moved through death camps like a rising star in a corporate machine. The soldiers surround her. She does not look away. She watches the liberators with the same cold indifference she gave the dying. To understand the birth of this monster, the film must rewind 20 years. Away from the gallows of 1945, back to a quiet cowshed in 1923. October 7, 1923, Pacewalk, Germany. A baby girl takes her first breath in a family of dairy farmers. Her father, Alfred Grese, raises 5 children. Irma is the third. It is a world of manual labor and heavy silence. By 1933, the atmosphere in Germany changes. The Nazi propaganda machine enters every home. In that year alone, the party's ideology infiltrated 97% of all German schools. Alfred Grese watches with disgust. He despises the movement. He forbids his children from joining the Nazi youth organizations. Even when they beg, the father tries to build a wall around his family. The state systematically tears it down. Irma sits in a classroom. On the wall, a portrait of Adolf Hitler replaces the crucifix. He becomes the new, twisted father figure for an entire generation. Teachers no longer just explain arithmetic. They narrate a world divided into masters and subhumans. Irma is 10 years old. She listens. She absorbs the poison like a dry sponge. The school wins the war for her mind. The girl returns home to the farm, carrying the silence of the Reich within her. While the classroom dictated her ideology, the Grese household provided her first practical lesson in violence. The state had already claimed her mind. Now, the family unit began to disintegrate at the seams. The year was 1936. Irma was 13 years old. Domestic life was a sequence of muffled arguments and the sharp ring of shattering plates. Her mother, Berta, discovered her husband's infidelity. The betrayal was absolute. One evening, the tension broke. Berta Grese drank a bottle of hydrochloric acid. The sound of a body collapsing, the chemical stench. For a 13-year-old girl, the primary moral anchor of her life vanished in a single, agonizing night. Did school offer a refuge? No. Classroom taunts became a daily ritual of survival. The bullying was physical and relentless. Her grades collapsed. By the age of 14, Irma walked out of the school gates for the last time. She was a dropout with no direction and a growing void where empathy should have been. Her father, Alfred, filled that void with his fists. He was a man of the old world, disciplined by rage and Nazi doctrine. He beat his children to enforce order. To Irma, the message was clear: power belongs to the one who strikes first. The following years were a blur of menial labor. She spent 6 months hauling sacks on a farm, another 6 months behind a retail counter. By the age of 15, Irma Grese was a drifter with no prospects and a fractured psyche. A fractured teenage mind found a new mentor in a white lab coat. 15-year-old Irma arrived at the Hohenleichen Sanatorium. She came to heal. She stayed to watch. This was no ordinary hospital. It was the private clinic of Karl Gebhardt, the personal physician to Heinrich Himmler. What happens to a girl when her first teacher is a pioneer of human torture? Irma spent 2 years in this environment. She saw the hierarchy of pain. Steel instruments lay on sterile trays. Gebhardt's hands moved with surgical precision. but his goals were filth. He didn't just treat patients, he experimented on them. The transition was systematic. She started as an assistant, she ended as an accomplice. Documents later proved the truth. At 16, Irma wasn't just carrying trays, she was participating in the procedures. She dreamed of a nursing degree. She wanted the status of a healer while practicing the skills of a killer. But the system had a different plan. Her academic records were a disaster. The Nazi bureaucracy saw no potential in her mind, only in her hands. The dream of the white coat vanished. The state sent her to a dairy farm. Imagine the resentment. Irma stood over a heavy industrial butter machine. Day after day, the mechanical rhythm of the churn. Her hands, which had touched the instruments of Hohenlichen, were now covered in grease and cream. She was 17 years old. She was a failure in a society that demanded perfection. The pressure in the boiler was reaching a breaking point. In 1942, the party gave the order for her transfer. In July 1942, the butter churn was replaced by a rubber truncheon. The train doors hissed open at Ravensbrück. Irma Grese was 18. She didn't find a job, she found a calling. Ravensbrück was the only major concentration camp built exclusively for women. It functioned like a massive industrial complex, but its machinery didn't produce goods. 3,500 female guards trained here. This wasn't a garrison. It was a corporate headquarters for systemic slaughter. These women were the staff of a factory where the only output was ash. 132,000 women passed through these gates. Irma's education began under Dorothea Binz. Binz was the master of the Ravensbrück method. Her curriculum was simple. Extract maximum labor until the heart stops, then extract more. She taught her trainees that mercy was a technical error. Grese watched Binz work. She studied the precision of the blows. She learned how to use a dog as a surgical tool. The camp staff operated with the efficiency of a clockwork mechanism. Violence was no longer an outburst of rage, it was a professional standard. The university was highly productive. 92,000 women never left the camp alive. Irma did not look away from the gore. Instead, her father's reaction to her new life was the only thing that stung. She returned home on leave in March 1943. During a casual dinner, she mentioned her role supervising prisoners. Her father did not see a successful daughter. He saw a monster. He unbuckled his belt and beat her until she could barely stand. Ravensbrück had replaced her conscience with a surgical blade. The camp functioned as a laboratory for Karl Gebhardt. He was the same doctor from her nursing school, but his tools had changed. He used hammers. He broke the legs of 80 Polish women to simulate battlefield trauma. Irma stood by his side. Did she feel the old urge to heal? No. She assisted as Gebhardt infected open wounds with bacteria and gangrene. Amputations took place on wooden tables without anesthesia. The air in the infirmary was thick with the smell of rotting flesh and the sound of rhythmic, guttural screaming. Irma watched every incision. She saw bones snap and eyes roll back. To her, this was not a tragedy. It was a promotion. The girl who was once bullied now held the power of life and death. She watched women beg for mercy and felt a surge of adrenaline. The screams of the dying were merely background noise to her career goals. Her father's blows couldn't break the conditioning of the SS. He threw her out and forbade her from ever returning to the family home. Irma simply walked away and headed back to the front lines of the Holocaust. In March 1943, Irma Grese stepped into Auschwitz-Birkenau. The transition was final. Behind her lay a broken family. Ahead, the most efficient killing machine in human history. This was death on an industrial scale. Grese stood at the camp gates every morning. She watched the work parties pass. Her hand gripped a custom-made whip. It was a precise tool, woven leather, lightweight. A layer of clear cellophane wrapped the handle and the lash. The cellophane served one purpose: blood washed off easily. She looked like a cinematic icon. Survivors remembered her features as perfect. Blue eyes, clear as a mountain lake, reflecting the gray smoke of the crematoria. Dr. Gisela Pearl, a prisoner and physician, called her one of the most beautiful women she had ever seen. The contrast was a weapon. The beautiful beast was a title earned through calculated cruelty. Grese didn't just follow orders. She craved the friction of the strike. When she swung the whip, she aimed for the face or the breast. She later boasted that the whip was light, but it was designed to sting. It was a toy for a girl who had finally found people who could not hit back. Even the camp commandant, Josef Kramer, noticed. He was a man nicknamed the Beast of Belsen, yet he found her violence excessive. He ordered her to stop using the whip. Grese ignored him. A junior female guard disregarded a direct order from an SS commandant to continue her private ritual of pain. She had bypassed the hierarchy of the Reich for the hierarchy of the lash. Other SS officers watched her methods with growing unease. By May 1944, Grese had achieved a level of sadism that disgusted even the veterans of the Totenkopfverband. May 1944, a promotion. At 20, Irma Grese became the senior supervisor of Birkenau's Camp C. 30,000 people. Imagine a small European city. Now, lock it inside one camp sector. The math was impossible. 30,000 prisoners in a space designed for 300. 100 times the limit. How do you control a crowd that size? Grese chose terror and exhaustion. 5 people shared a single bunk. Others lay on floors slick with human waste. From 3 in the morning until 9, the prisoners stood for roll call. 6 hours, perfectly still, in the freezing mud. Move and you were beaten. Falter and you knelt for hours. Grese called this her kingdom. She forced prisoners to hold heavy stones over their heads until their muscles gave out. When they fell, she kicked them into unconsciousness. Her power was absolute. She bypassed the chain of command, answering only to her own dark impulses. She took lovers among the prisoners, both men and women, treating humans like disposable toys. When she grew bored, she sent them to the gas chambers. She maintained a close relationship with Dr. Josef Mengele. They walked the ramps together. The angel of death and the beautiful beast. Side by side, they decided who would work and who would burn. But her cruelty had a specific target. Survivor Olga Lengel watched as Grese scanned the lines for beauty. If a woman was attractive, she was a threat. Grese could not tolerate competition. She personally selected the most beautiful women for the gas chamber. Grese did not just command, she observed. She found a specific rhythmic pleasure in the mechanics of agony. When she released her dogs, she did not look away. The animals were kept in a state of constant, forced hunger. They did not just bite, they tore. How did she react to the screams? She watched with bloodshot eyes. A smile stayed on her face. To Irma, the sight of blood was intoxicating. It was a physical high. When a group of prisoners lost control of a heavy stone wagon, she saw an opportunity. She signaled the dogs. The animals lunged at the exhausted women. Grese stood still, savoring the sound of teeth hitting bone. But her cruelty followed no logic. It was a lottery. 14-year-old Alice Tenenbaum was a prisoner in the shadow of the chimneys. Josef Mengele selected her for the gas chambers. He did it 16 times. 16 times, Grese marched into the selection line. She grabbed the girl and dragged her back to life. Alice looked like someone else. She was a mirror image of Irma's own sister, Helene. This was the core of her pathology. Grese could recognize a family bond, yet she spent her days erasing the families of others. She saved one sister because of a memory, while sending thousands of other sisters to the fire. The monster possessed a distorted sentimentality. It did not replace her sadism, it sat right beside it. Alice Tenenbaum survived 16 selections. January 1945. The Red Army surged toward Auschwitz. The industrial slaughterhouse began to fold, but the terror simply changed its geography. Irma Grese joined the death marches. Thousands of prisoners stumbled through sub-zero temperatures for hundreds of miles. Anyone who collapsed received a bullet. Grese didn't just watch the executions. She invented new ways to torment those already dying in the snow. By March, she reached Bergen-Belsen. It was a kingdom of rot. The barracks floor disappeared under layers of excrement. The air carried the heavy, sweet stench of unburied meat. Tens of thousands of women slept sitting up. They shared 200 blankets among 30,000 people. A single slice of bread, a bowl of watery turnip soup. That was the daily ration. Why did she earn a new nickname so quickly? In Auschwitz, it took years. In Bergen-Belsen, 3 weeks were enough for the prisoners to name her the Beast of Belsen. She stripped women naked in the mud. She beat them with rubber truncheons. She forced skeletal prisoners to perform sport exercises until their hearts gave out. One afternoon, 2 sisters found a pile of discarded potato peels. They began to eat. Grace stepped out of the shadows. She grabbed them by the hair and smashed their skulls together with a sickening crack. The Nazi regime was a corpse. The British were miles away. Grace didn't flee. She didn't hide. She was still swinging a riding crop as the first tanks appeared on the horizon. 250 to 300 people were dying every single day. April 17, 1945. The chaos of the German retreat ended for Irma Grese on April 17, 1945. British military police moved in. They found her among the ruins of Bergen-Belsen. Grese did not look like a defeated soldier. She looked like a woman preparing for a premiere. In her cell, she spent hours in front of a small mirror. She brushed her blonde hair. She adjusted her curls. She practiced a soft, practiced smile. To the world, she was a monster. To herself, she was a rising star. The illusion met reality at the Belsen War Crimes Tribunal. She sat in the dock with an air of bored arrogance. When survivors pointed shaking fingers at her, she rolled her eyes. She called their testimonies a mountain made out of a molehill. How did she explain the whips, the dogs, and the selections for the gas chambers? Her voice remained calm. It was level, cold. It was our duty to exterminate antisocial elements, she told the court, to ensure the future of Germany. Number 2, to the British judges, she was a war criminal. To the 22-year-old girl in the dock, she was a patriot performing a necessary, if messy, chore. 22 years old, she was the youngest woman sentenced to death by a British court in the 20th century. While her peers in London were finishing university, Grese was measuring the drop of a noose. The evidence was a tidal wave of blood. Witness after witness described her twisted entertainment. They spoke of beatings that lasted until the victim stopped breathing. Grese didn't listen. She was busy dreaming of a film career. She genuinely believed the trial was a stepping stone to Hollywood. She expected an acquittal. She expected fame. The delusion shattered on November 17, 1945. The president of the tribunal stood up. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. He read the verdict. The court sentenced Irma Grese to death by hanging. The verdict was final. On December 13, 1945, the most experienced executioner in Britain entered the prison in Hameln. Albert Pierpoint did not see a beast. He saw a bureaucratic task. Pierpoint worked with silent precision. He calculated the drop based on her weight. He checked the trapdoor mechanism. He tested the hemp rope. This was not an act of vengeance. It was a cold ritual of social purification. Irma walked toward the gallows. Her steps were steady. Her face remained a mask of defiance. Pierpoint stood ready. The young woman looked at the noose and the man holding it. Even at the edge of the abyss, she maintained her role. She spoke only one word: schnell, faster. She was 22 years old, the youngest woman executed under British law in the 20th century. A sharp metallic crack echoed through the room. The trapdoor fell. The rope snapped taut. The body swayed in the darkness of the pit. Irma Grese was dead. The rope went slack. The hatch closed. But the question Irma Grese left behind remained hanging in the cold air of Hameln prison. Evil does not always wear a jagged mask. Sometimes it has the face of a 22-year-old girl. High cheekbones, perfectly styled hair. Look at the photos. You see the innocent blue eyes of a shopkeeper's daughter. You do not see the void behind them. This is the social theater of the Third Reich. It took an ordinary girl and stripped away her empathy, layer by layer. It replaced it with the intoxicating high of absolute power. She was not a biological anomaly. She was a product. After 1945, thousands like her simply stopped killing. They took off the black uniforms. They washed the mud of Auschwitz from their boots. They returned to small towns and quiet suburbs. They became your neighbors. They became the kindly grandmothers in the bakery. They became the clerks at the post office. The uniform was gone. The internal rot stayed. History proves that the capacity for cruelty is not a monster's trait. It is a human one. We must remember the victims of Bergen-Belsen to recognize the next beautiful beast before she picks up the whip. The ideology that created Irma Grese survives by hiding in plain sight.